We are here because the Wall Street Journal just posted a report detailing the origins of the Bob Iger-Bob Chapek feud. And there were some interesting things in here that I think we need to talk about. I will say, I think it's pretty clear that this came from Iger's people, not Chapek's people.
Oh yeah.
Although it does, it does give Iger the sort of meddling coming of age. But I will say, it's interesting. So Bob Chapek becomes CEO in February. The idea was he would handle day-to-day stuff, and Bob Iger would handle creative sort of decisions and things like that. Any case, pandemic happens, right? And someone asked Bob Iger if he would take like a, more active role in the company that was originally foreseen. He goes, obviously, and I think it's been reported that this was going to happen, that they had Bob Chapek and Bob Iger had a conversation on the plane ride back from the shareholder meeting, which was the day before everything shut down, right? Precedented time.
Mm-hmm.
You have the guy so this one report says that really the origin of the rift was Bob Chapek wanted to do the layoffs that happened due to COVID earlier than Bob Iger. Bob Iger wasn't against doing the layoffs, but he wanted to wait till Congress passed the CARES Act, which provided economic assistance for laid off workers. And Bob Chapek didn't want to wait for that. And you're talking about employees, so obviously if you're a producer at ABC, you're probably okay. But, we're also talking about, frontline cast members at Disneyland and Disney World. And the parks business is obviously where the layoffs hurt the most because, they were closed as opposed to, Disney Plus or something, which was still growing in its own way. So the thought that the origin of this is Bob Chapek digging his heels in to before there's any major assistance for laid off workers, that was his line in the sand is astonishing. Now, obviously this is one side of the story, hopefully. But I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, like you said, this is one side of the story, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly what Chapek's point of view and Chapek's inner circle's point of view is. But I think you could boil it down to the name of the act is that it seems like Iger cared and Chapek, maybe he didn't care as much. Maybe he did care, but he definitely didn't seem to care as much when it came to the livelihood of his cast members. You are a little broken up there, Benji.
I would say, am I back?
You're back. You're freezing a little bit.
Oh, hang on a sec. Hang on. I think I know the problem. Okay. Any case, the fact that what happened is then Chapek says, hey, he's not letting me do what I want to do. Then the board acquiesces, gives him a board seat, basically tells Bob Iger, you got to let Bob Chapek run this as Bob Chapek sees fit. It's his company now, even though technically Bob Chapek reported to Bob Iger. And then this is where the friction just continued. And, we talked about how it was palpable ever since then. And that, and if you put yourself in Bob Iger's shoes, he basically left Disney at the peak of everything. Now, granted, we didn't know the pandemic was going to happen, obviously, but that he is seeing someone he thinks destroying, his legacy, basically. And part of Bob Iger's legacy at this point is a terrible succession. I mean, if there's one thing he was bad at, it was succession, right? We had Tom Staggs, he goes away. We had Jerry Zula goes away. We had other people that were sort of. So I think it's pretty clear that now his job is to groom somebody that has a heart in Bob Iger's perspective, right? He's talking about, some of the complaints that were listed in here was price increases at the park. He felt were too high. He felt that he was not focused on, he was only caring what Wall Street wanted and not what was best for the long-term strength of the company. And that's something that Bob Iger's always sort of chafed at, is Wall Street doesn't know what they're doing, and you manage to Wall Street, and then it ends up being a mess, because Wall Street, if Wall Street knew how to run the Walt Disney Company, they'd be running.
And you are frozen again.
But I think it's pretty clear that there's Bob Iger really regrets picking Bob Chapek. I mean, even we kind of wondered if there was going to be any sort of ramifications for the parks. Like, is this just a distraction on streaming, or was there something more to the story? But I think it's pretty clear at this point that Bob Iger also feels that there's things that need to happen at the sort of remediations that need to happen at the park.
I think that's one of the clear things, is especially when it comes to the parks, is that everything is just a little too complicated. And I know that's kind of a common cause and a common complaint amongst Disney fans. But to be fair, it kind of is true. And I think that might be something that we'll see, maybe not ticket price decreases, but kind of like a rollback on some of the complicated aspects of the Disney park experience at this point.
Well, and I got to say, this report really, I was never necessarily a Chapek fan, but I felt that he was given a bad rap by a lot of people. That they would twist his words around to make it sound, he had already lost the fans before he ever got the job, because they didn't like what he was doing at the parks. And, I'd go like, okay, well, hang on a sec. Like, that's not really what he means, or, he doesn't speak well. He doesn't, I don't think he's a bad guy, but it's one thing to say, hey, to have wanted to do the layoffs. That's one thing. But you have the best CEO of all time for an entertainment company saying, don't do this, who's essentially your boss. And you're going, no, I want to lay people off sooner. Like, what kind of arrogance do you have as having had the job for a month and then to chafe with the guy who knows more than you? I mean, when I had bosses, I might not always agree with them, but I always valued their time because they knew more than me, because they'd been doing it longer than me. I mean, and if they hadn't been, I didn't want to have them as a boss, because I want to learn from my boss. I don't want to have to teach my boss. I mean, outside of, comes into the department and but has experience elsewhere. Like, I want to grow. And so why you wouldn't listen to, for the next 2 years while Bob Iger was there, listen to every word, get every piece of advice you could have. I'm not saying you don't push back if you don't agree, but listen and ultimately do what he says, because what did Chapek think was going to happen if he pissed off Bob Iger? Bob Chapek at this point, especially because he's managing in a pandemic, is not going to get any cred, right? He's not going to grow the business. He's just trying to hang on. And so I don't understand the arrogance to just toss Bob Iger aside. Now, yeah, I get it. Bob Iger had problems letting go. But you know what?
And I think those problems, still to a degree are still there. But now
but that's okay, right?
As the savior.
Right. It's not your little playground, right? He gave you the job. You think you'd appreciate him. I just don't
Absolutely.
get it. And if he's being annoying, it's like how sometimes your parents tell you something you don't, they just rag on you, but you still let it go because it's your parents. Like, I feel like that's what would happen. It's like, it's not like he took over for someone who got let go. He got, he took over, was made the heir apparent only because it was time for him to retire. He felt he wanted to retire. Why would you try and set off in a bold new direction when it had worked extraordinarily well? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think a lot of the problems Disney has right now is trying to fix things that aren't broken.
Yeah, and they're always trying to innovate, which is a double-edged sword, because sometimes something works perfectly well as it is. And I think that's one of the common complaints that I have seen in all of the articles and such that have come out in the days since the whole incident started, is that Chapek kind of had a viewpoint of looking towards, the next financial quarter or the next couple of years, but didn't really have any thought or plan for, or at least it didn't seem as if he had any thought or plan for long-term success and growth.
Well, and that's the thing, is it's one thing to kind of always push yourself and always try new things, but that you shouldn't throw in it. I mean, it's like the Disney Wish. The Disney Cruise Line has had certain things that have been very popular. When you make a new ship, you should innovate, try new things, but that doesn't mean you need to discard everything else that's worked for so long.
Mm-hmm. Which could then also be a criticism of the new ships, or the new ship that is kind of a Disney cruise ship and kind of not.
Well, and I think it'll be interesting to see what gets undone. I mean, part of the reason the park pass system exists is, could you imagine how crowded they would be if they let everybody in at this point? I mean, there's just, the parks are too crowded. Now, one might say, Bob Iger, the other option is increase capacity, whether it's through new entertainment or stuff that you can put up real quick so that you can not turn people away, but still have a good experience. I mean, that's hard. It's the parks can get crowded, and at some point you got to turn people away. Otherwise it's just miserable. But I don't know what Bob Iger's marching orders are going to be for the parks. And it'll be interesting to see how he works with Josh D'Amaro, who obviously was following. We always sort of questioned what was an Chapek's decision, what was the D'Amaro decision, or and we don't really know. I mean, I'm guessing we will know now more, because whatever changes are made would be not a D'Amaro decision or an Iger edict. I don't know. It doesn't look good, I think, for Bob Chapek, that according to this report, that his first disagreement that caused all of this strife was wanting to lay off people before the assistance package. I mean, you're talking about weeks, not months of a delay.
Yeah.
And I understand the balance sheet and all that stuff, but you still have Bob Iger there who could kind of help you with managing the balance sheet, because he has the
and you also have to look towards more than just the balance sheet. You have to look towards, how is this going to look, and cast member morale, and how is it going to look to your fans as well.
Well, the other thing I think is interesting, and I know my signal's pretty bad, but Bob Iger is coming back as the returning hero, and is more beloved now than he was then, because they know what the other option. I mean, they're literally giving away Italian ice to any cast member at a place, an establishment in Lake Buena Vista, to celebrate. It's like you landed on the moon.
Yeah, and the overall reaction to the news, just across Disney Twitter, and I even had a friend that was on the tram at the time, and everyone on the tram into Disneyland was talking about it. So it was something that was known very quickly, and immediately became a thing of joy and celebration for people, which does not look good for Chapek.
And that's what I'm curious. What we haven't seen is a real communication plan to the cast. I mean, as a big wide net. Obviously, he's talked to people, but not the sort of how is he going to manage the morale, besides the fact he's back, and how is he going to engage the fans? I talked ad nauseum about how he was good at finding those things to kind of give to the fans as a whether it was D23, creating D23, Walt's office, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, those little things that made it show he was a Disney fan. And it'll be interesting to see what he does how he manages that relationship. Whether he's using D23 or just coming out in other ways. Does he make an appearance on the Christmas special? How does he turn the narrative? Because part of the biggest problem Disney had was just everyone hated Bob Chapek. I mean, it's not even just Disney fans, right? It had transcended that into being a thing that my parents would talk to me about who are not Disney fans, or random people in the airport. I was literally walking through a Vegas casino and I got into an elevator, and the guy was asking me what I thought about Bob Chapek.
Which is insane,
right? And I mean, that when you think about it, like, people aren't going to like, hey, what do you think about Jeff Immelt? Like that didn't happen, but because Disney is Disney, it provided this weird. To me, it's like the Disney CEO is like the captain of a cruise ship. Part of the job is to actually steer the ship and make sure everything's running well. The other part is to have dinner and appear in shows and meet guests, right? That's a part of the job that Chapek never really excelled at. I think he tried. He just wasn't good at it. And I hate to think that is a reason he can't be CEO, but at Disney, you really need that. I remember reading Michael's book, and he talked about how he took acting lessons so he could introduce the wonderful world of Disney. Like, that's part of being the Disney CEO. If you don't want to do that, go to Warner Brothers or Paramount or something. But at Disney, you are. I mean, it's part of the Walt legacy, right? We all knew who Walt Disney was. I mean, we've heard the name Jack Warner, but I don't think any of us could spot him out in a lineup unless you're a real cinephile. And it's just a different company. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. Go work someplace else.
And I think going back to like your idea for I think that would be a brilliant idea for like the Christmas special or something like that. Just have Bob Iger come out in a nice cardigan, a nice sweater, and just do like a whole Michael Eisner, like, talk directly to the camera kind of thing. I feel like that would be something that would provide some real goodwill right now.
I just want to share, we tweeted the story. The user Imagination said, so Iger wanted to delay a layoff so employees would have CARES Act benefits to help, and Chapek said, no, I don't care. I want to chop them now. Again, Iger isn't the end-all be-all, but I firmly believe he cares more about people than Chapek ever did or ever will.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's plain. Of course, this is, how much you believe the reporting in this, but, it's coming from a reputable source, so I did tend to believe it.
Well, I mean, it's probably accurate reporting, but maybe not the full story, right?
Yes.
And in the end, it rings true,
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when I read some of these things, and not the Wall Street Journal is pretty reputable. I mean, they all make mistakes, but it's not. We're not talking like TMZ here, and it just feels, or even Variety or Hollywood Reporter, they get pretty biased pretty quickly, or but I just there may be more about because even this article mentions, like, there's questions as to why that really Bob Iger cannot let go, and I think that is a problem. The problem is when he did let go, he picked the wrong guy.
Yeah,
and and in some ways it's almost endearing to Iger, because you go, here's a guy who's actually it's easy when you're a CEO to just go, I'm gone, all right? I'm out. Peace out. Like, I do my thing. It's not my job anymore. But that he still cared about Disney. They still cared about the employees of Disney when this was all going down. Almost makes you like him more, even though it was his fault. That it's not good that he couldn't let go. But at the same time, thank God he didn't let go.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely a very important part of this is just seeing Iger's humanity, I think, and just seeing that personal touch that I think was missing with Chapek.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, it's also interesting because Disney's communications chief, Christina Stelke, was appointed by Jeff Merrill, who was then let go. So then so it was her job to make Bob Chapek look good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now she reports to Bob Iger, and it's her job to make Bob Iger look good. And those two are odds, which is a very interesting position to be in. Now she has a legacy of, her sister worked for Condoleezza Rice, a Republican. She worked for Michelle Obama, a Democrat. She has this long sort of history of complicated relationships, but it'll be interesting to see what she did.
Yeah, no, that sounds really intriguing.
This comment, what did you think of Tom?
I really like Tom Staggs, and I don't entirely remember the situation for how he ended up leaving, but I liked him, and it seemed like he had a very personable attitude. And again, that sort of thing is kind of hard to judge. But I like the decisions that he made. I mean, the first real one I became aware of was the changing in New Fantasyland, from having like 4 or 5 princess meet and greets to having Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. And I think that was, a very good decision that immediately endeared him with a lot of Disney fans, myself included.
I think his challenge was he had 2 big projects that kind of faltered. One was the Next Generation Experience, Magic Bands, Touch Points, Fast Pass Plus, and then Playmation, which you probably don't even remember because it was such a bomb.
I do not know that.
And so it just sort of became like he would jump on these initiatives without sort of really fleshing them out. And, I don't know why the board, or presumably Bob Iger, lost faith in him. I'm not inclined to think it's just Bob wanted to keep the job longer. It just doesn't feel like that's what happened, but I don't really know. Gia says we had so much Playmation marked out. Yeah, I paid full price. Actually, mine came with like batteries that were like already corroded because batteries were included. That was like because it was so expensive, and it was just like it was a whole mess. It was like I got a floor model that wasn't. It was bad, and I had to call support and get it exchanged. Justin, you did cover that for LP. That was back in the day, man. Thanks for doing that. So I don't know. I've kind of gone back and forth with who will be the next CEO, and Wall Street wants Dana Walden, and I would have thought that's probably the most likely situation. But if Bob Iger's major concern right now is caring about people, then Josh kind of almost comes to prominence in my mind. Not that Dana, I'm not saying Dana Walton doesn't care about people, but Josh has made that as his thing, right? He's going to invest in break rooms, make the cast experience better. He tweets, he Instagrams and engages with people. He meets guests and like interacts with them. He's almost a celebrity, which, it's like if you could take that part of him and then take it with a smooth operator, who really knows their stuff. I'm not saying he doesn't, but, especially with the Hollywood part, he probably doesn't. That would be the sort of ideal candidate because, he can talk the talk. That's why people love. One of the reasons people love him. It's right. It's not they engage with him that Bob never did because, we always wondered why does Bob get the blame and Josh doesn't? And I think it's part of it is that he says hello to you when you walk by.
Yeah. I think I wonder what the probability of going back to a sort of Michael Eisner, Frank Wells type situation would be, because I feel like that might be. I don't really know all the ins and outs of how possible that could be in this day and age, but I feel like you could have Dana Walden and Josh D'Amaro in similar positions, and then be able to get both sides of the key.
The challenge you have with that, and it has a long legacy at Disney, right? Walt and Roy, but Roy would get on it, but it was okay because they were brothers, right? Like they didn't let it destroy their relationship. They had times when they weren't talking to each other for long periods, but in the end they were still brothers. So it's, how do you do that without it becoming a power trip for one or the other? And you'd have to set that up as a clear expectation. It worked for Frank because Frank didn't want any spotlight.
Yeah.
And it was, it worked really well. And it's, I think you're right. That's ideal for Disney. Bob was able to do it, but Bob was a once in a lifetime kind of guy. You just don't get it that. You don't get someone who can do that both sides. You almost need the guy who can go to premieres, lead D23, make the fun sort of announcements, be the voice of legacy and creativity, and then have the guy who's worried about the balance sheet is a different thing. And how do you make that happen? I think that would be great, but I don't know. You need
the right
here. That's what Bob and Bob were supposed to do, and it didn't work. And I'm not. I don't know who to blame because we'll never know. But the two Bobs could not work with each other for the 2 years they were supposed to. I do have some breaking financial news, and I don't know if this relates to what's going on with Disney or not, or I should say, Bob Iger, because we obviously know Bob Iger has ties to China through the opening of Hong Kong Disneyland and Shanghai Disneyland. Avatar is getting a release date in China, which is a coveted thing. So won't have that story up tonight because we're talking to you right now, but we will have that up tomorrow. So that's exciting news for Disney.
That's good. I'm sure that'll do quite well in the box office for them.
Yeah, especially, they love their spectacles and 3D
and
all that, over there. And I think that's really going to help the economic prospects of that film, because it came out today that basically that movie was so expensive. If it's not like one of the top 5 movies of all time, it's going to lose money. So, but in any case,
James Cameron has a funny way of promoting his films. It's very interesting.
In any case, any last words before we wrap this up?
No, I can't think of anything. I'm just interested to see the inevitable continuing stories that come out on this.
And as we've been breaking in all the time lately, because there's been a lot of news. But if you ever want to follow us 24/7, laughingplace.com/TV, laughingplace.com/TV. You can keep us on whenever there's news. We'll break in, and we also have fun shows such as Barely Necessities, our merchandise show, Marvel show, all sorts of fun. So anyway, keep in touch with us, and we will see you soon.
Take care, everybody.